The sky above the ruined city was painted with smoke and dust. Once, the tall towers had touched the clouds, shining with glass and light. Now they stood broken, their walls cracked, their windows shattered. The ground trembled from distant strikes as two great armies fought across the land. Humans and Viuri, though different in shape and history, had been forced to fight side by side against a larger enemy that sought to erase them both. Among the soldiers, one human stood out. His name was Tom. He wore heavy armor, thick plates of steel that covered him from head to toe. The armor was scratched, burned, and dented, but it still held strong. For many soldiers, that armor was not just metal. It was a symbol. When Tom walked onto the field, humans felt courage, and the Viuri felt as if no enemy could break through. The Viuri were taller than humans, with skin that shimmered faintly like stone in the sun. They spoke with calm voices, their language soft and flowing. Yet on this day, calmness was lost. Inside the ruined hall that now served as a command post, voices rose high. Myra, a Viuri commander, stood with her arms crossed. Her soldiers surrounded her, while human officers stood on the other side of the table. Maps were spread before them, showing enemy movements. The air was tense. "We cannot keep fighting like this," Myra said sharply. "Every time we advance, more of our people fall. And yet you humans push forward as if our lives are nothing. Perhaps you fight only for yourselves. Perhaps you never cared about the alliance at all." Her words cut through the room like a blade. The human officers stiffened. Some looked ready to argue, but none spoke first. All eyes turned toward Tom. He had been silent the whole meeting, his tall figure leaning against the wall, his armored arms crossed. His face was hidden under the helmet, but everyone waited for him. Finally, Tom moved. Slowly, he stepped away from the wall. His boots echoed against the stone floor. Without a word, he reached up and unlocked the helmet. With a hiss, the seal opened, and he lifted it off, revealing a face hardened by years of war. His eyes were calm, yet heavy with something deeper. Myra met his gaze. For a moment, her voice faltered. She had spoken harshly, but she had not expected silence in return. Tom placed the helmet gently on the table. Then, with deliberate care, he began removing the plates of his armor. The sound of metal clicking and sliding off filled the room. Chest plate. Shoulder guards. Arm bracers. Piece by piece, he set them down. The pile grew until the man who had once seemed larger than life now stood in simple black clothing. The hall was silent. No one dared to interrupt. When the last piece was placed on the table, Tom looked at Myra again. His voice was steady, yet quiet. "You believe we fight only for ourselves. You believe we care nothing for your people. Very well. I will not fight at all." Then he turned and walked past them. His steps echoed as he crossed the hall and pushed open the heavy doors. Outside, the wind blew dust across the ruined streets. Without looking back, Tom walked into the open city. The Viuri soldiers stared in shock. Some whispered to each other. He left his armor. He walked away. Does he mean to abandon us? Myra stood frozen. Her pride told her she had spoken the truth. But another part of her, deep inside, felt uneasy. Tom had not shouted. He had not argued. He had simply walked away, and somehow, that silence weighed heavier than any anger. A young human officer spoke softly. "Commander, you do not understand. That armor was not just his. It was a promise. When he wore it, he carried the hopes of everyone here. If he lays it down, it means something has broken. Myra clenched her fists. She tried to push aside the uneasy feeling, but the hall felt colder without Tom standing there. Outside, Tom kept walking. The city stretched around him, broken and quiet. He could hear distant fire in the skies, the clash of weapons far away. Yet in this part of the ruins, only the wind spoke. He looked down at his hands. For years, those hands had held weapons. They had lifted wounded allies. They had carried burdens no one else wanted. He thought of Myra's words. Perhaps she believed them. Perhaps many did. Humans were not trusted, even when they bled for others. He remembered battlefields where human soldiers had shielded Viori children with their own bodies. He remembered nights when he had stood guard so that others could sleep. None of it mattered if distrust remained. Tom took a deep breath. Without armor, without title, he was only a man now. Yet he felt strangely lighter. He no longer carried the weight of proving himself to those who doubted. Still, as he walked, he knew one truth: no matter what was said, he could never turn his back on the weak. He would not fight for the Alliance any longer, but he would not stop being human. Back in the hall, Myra sat in silence. Her soldiers waited for orders, but she could not speak. For the first time in many years, doubt entered her heart. She replayed the moment again in her mind, the way Tom had removed the armor without anger, without pride. She wondered if she had made a mistake that could not be undone. The battle outside raged on, but inside the ruined hall, a different struggle had begun. One woman questioned her own words, and one man walked away from the war, leaving behind the symbol of his strength. The ruins stretched far beyond the command hall. Broken bridges, fallen towers, and empty streets painted the picture of a world that once lived with light and song. Tom walked slowly across the silence. His boots pressed into the dust, leaving tracks that the wind soon tried to erase. The armor he had carried for so long was no longer with him. All he had now was a small pack and the clothes beneath the steel plates. Every step echoed with the memory of Myra's words. Harsh. Cold. Doubtful. She had spoken them before her soldiers, before his people, and the weight of them had struck deeper than any blade. Tom had faced enemies with sharp claws, machines that fired without pause, skies full of fire. None of those things had made him stop. But words from an ally, spoken without trust, had cut in a way he could not ignore. The streets ahead were empty, yet Tom felt the presence of ghosts. He could almost see the faces of fallen comrades, men and women who had stood with him in battles past. They had given their lives to shield not only humans but also the Viori. And still, the commander had questioned their purpose. He paused at the remains of a fountain. Water no longer flowed there. Dust lay thick in the stone bowl, and vines crept over the broken carvings. He sat down at its edge, resting his pack beside him. For a long moment, he closed his eyes. The silence was heavy, but it also gave him room to think. Tom remembered the early days of the Alliance. The Viori had not trusted humans then either. They had seen them as fragile, too quick to burn, too weak to last. But time and war had changed that view. Or so Tom had believed. Humans had bled for this war. They had stood on the front lines when others had stepped back. They had carried loads, repaired machines, and guarded supply lines. Tom himself had led missions through firestorms and wastelands. He wondered now if those memories meant nothing to the Viori. Meanwhile, back in the hall, whispers spread. Weary soldiers asked their commander what would happen next. Humans muttered to one another, voices filled with unease. Myra gave orders, but she felt the doubt in her own chest. She had spoken out of frustration, not thinking of the wound her words might leave. She had wanted to express her fear of losing more soldiers, but instead, she had accused. Now she could not take it back. As the sun dipped low, Tom rose from the fountain and continued walking. The city outside the main camp was less guarded. Shadows stretched across broken buildings. He moved carefully, for he knew dangers still lurked. Enemy scouts often moved through the ruins at night, and hungry beasts prowled among the rubble. Still, he felt calmer without the weight of armor. Every piece of metal he had removed was like a burden lifted. The armor had been strong, but it had also been heavy, both in body and in spirit. People had looked at him not as a man, but as a symbol. Without it, he could breathe. Without it, he was free to walk as himself. At a crossroads of broken roads, Tom set up a small fire with scraps of wood. The glow lit the cracked walls around him. He cooked a thin meal from rations, ate slowly, and stared into the flames. He thought again of Myra. He had seen her fight bravely in past battles. He had seen her care for her soldiers, tending to their wounds when the healers could not reach them. He had even believed there was respect between them. Perhaps he had been wrong. But even now, even after all that was said, he could not feel hatred toward her. Instead, he felt tired. Tired of explaining, tired of proving, tired of being doubted. The night deepened, and Tom lay down beside the fire, eyes watching the stars that still pierced through the smoke. He thought of his home world, far away, and the family he had left behind. He wondered if they would even know how much he had given here. Then sleep took him, slow and heavy. Far behind, in the command hall, Myra also could not sleep. She walked the length of the room again and again, her soldiers watching her in silence. Her mind returned to Tom's calm eyes when he had removed his armor. There had been no anger, no shout, only quiet disappointment. Somehow that silence hurt more than if he had argued. One of her soldiers spoke softly. "Commander, the human was our shield. Without him, the line may not hold." Myra turned away. She could not show doubt before her people. But in her heart, she knew the soldier was right. The next day, Tom continued his walk. He passed ruined markets, where stalls still held rusted remains of tools. He crossed a bridge that had half fallen into the river below. Along the way, he met a group of children, human children, lost and hiding in the rubble. Their parents had been killed in an attack. They looked at him with fear at first, then hope when he offered food. He stayed with them until they found a safer shelter. He did not speak of his choice to leave the alliance. He did not tell them of Myra's words. He simply helped, because that was what he knew how to do. When the children were safe, he walked on again. His heart was still heavy, but he knew one thing clearly. Even if commanders doubted him, even if alliances broke apart, he would not stop being human. And to be human, to him, meant helping those who could not fight for themselves. As the sun set once more, Tom looked back at the distant glow of the camp he had left. Smoke rose above it, a reminder of battles still raging. He did not know if he would ever return. But for now, he walked forward into the ruins, a man without armor, carrying only his quiet promise to himself. The camp was quieter than usual. Soldiers moved with slower steps, their eyes shifting often toward the empty corner where Tom's armor had once rested. The heavy plates, now lying untouched on the table, no longer carried the same weight of hope. Without the men inside them, the armor was nothing more than steel. Among the humans, whispers spread. Why did he leave? Was it something the Viuri said? Will he return? No one had answers. The officers avoided the subject during briefings, but everyone felt the gap. On patrols, soldiers moved with less confidence. In battles, their shouts were weaker, their lines less steady. Tom had not been their commander, but he had been something greater. He had been proof that courage could stand against fear. The Viuri soldiers felt the loss as well, though most would not admit it. Some muttered that humans were unreliable, that Tom's choice proved their weakness. Yet when they stood guard at night, they remembered his tall figure walking calmly into the dark, armor shining even under fire. Now, in his absence, the shadows seemed larger, the nights colder. Myra noticed all of it. She gave orders, checked defenses, and led her troops, but she felt the strain more with each passing day. Her words had caused this fracture. She had meant to protect her people, to push for caution, but instead she had broken trust. Her pride resisted admitting it, yet in the quiet hours she replayed the moment again and again. The sound of armor being set down haunted her thoughts. The enemy, sharp and watchful, soon sensed weakness. Scouts crept closer to the camp. Attacks grew more frequent. Where before Tom had led charges that pushed the enemy back, now the humans and Viuri struggled to hold ground. Each battle left more wounded, more tired faces. One night, an alarm rang across the camp. Enemy machines rolled from the hills, their lights glowing red. The defenders scrambled into position, humans and Viuri side by side. Myra shouted commands, raising her soldiers' spirits as best she could. The clash that followed was fierce. Blasts shook the ground. Fire streaked through the sky. The soldiers fought hard, but the enemy pressed with greater force. A line of human fighters began to fall back. Without Tom to anchor them, fear spread quickly. Myra leaped forward, striking down an enemy machine with her blade. She shouted, "Hold the line! Stand together!" But her voice did not carry the same weight Tom's presence once had. The soldiers obeyed, but their movements were strained. At last, the enemy pulled back, leaving smoke and broken machines behind. Victory was theirs, but it felt hollow. Many had fallen. The survivors sat in silence, their eyes tired. Myra walked among them, checking wounds, speaking soft words, but she felt the truth. The alliance was cracking. In the human quarters, officers gathered. One of them spoke, his tone sharp. "We cannot last like this. Tom held the heart of our people. Without him, every day grows harder." Another officer frowned. Perhaps he was right to walk away. If even our allies doubt us, why should we stay? Silence followed. Doubt spread like fire through dry grass. Meanwhile, far from the camp, Tom walked among ruins, unaware of how deep the cracks had grown. He had found a group of old human shelters, hidden beneath broken stone. He helped repair the walls, guided the people there, and taught them how to defend themselves with simple traps and barriers. He never spoke of the alliance or his past role. To them, he was just a traveler, a man who offered help. Word began to spread. Stories whispered from one group to another about the lone human warrior who had left his armor behind but still walked the ruins, protecting the lost and forgotten. These stories traveled faster than Myra expected. Soon they reached even her ears. At first, she refused to believe. But as more reports came, she could no longer deny it. Tom was out there, not idle, not abandoning his humanity, but helping in silence. Her heart twisted. She had spoken of selfishness, yet he gave without asking for reward. The days turned harder. Another attack struck, this time at the supply lines. Without Tom's guidance, the defenders lost much of their food and medicine. The soldiers grew hungry and weak. Some whispered that perhaps Tom had been right to leave, that maybe the alliance itself was doomed. Myra stood on the walls one night, staring into the distant ruins. The stars above were faint through the smoke, but she searched them anyway, as if they could give her answers. She thought of the words she had spoken. She thought of Tom's silence. And for the first time, she admitted the truth to herself. She had been wrong. Her second-in-command approached. "Commander, the men grow restless. They ask if the human will return." Myra closed her eyes. She did not answer at first. Then she said softly, "He may not. Not after what I have done." The soldier hesitated. "And if he does not, can we still win?" Myra looked out at the smoke rising from the distant hills. Her heart was heavy, but she spoke with firmness. "We will fight, with or without him. But I fear we will not fight as well." The soldier bowed and left, but the weight remained. Myra stayed on the wall until dawn, the cracks in the alliance clearer with each passing hour. In the morning, the camp stirred with tired movements. Repairs were made, patrols sent out, weapons sharpened. Yet the spirit of the army was dim. Some humans spoke of leaving, of returning to their own. Some Fury muttered that perhaps they had trusted humans too much. The bond that had held them together frayed with every word of doubt. The city stretched like a maze of broken stone and steel. Where once lights had glowed in every window, now only shadows moved across cracked walls. Tom walked through the silence, carrying a small pack and a simple blade at his side. Without his armor, he no longer looked like a symbol of war. He looked like any traveler, worn but steady, moving with quiet purpose. He had left the Alliance camp behind, yet he did not wander without aim. His heart pulled him toward places where voices were weakest, where people struggled in silence. He knew there were still humans scattered through the ruins, families who had hidden when battles grew too fierce. Some had lost their homes, some had lost their guards, but they had not lost hope. Tom searched for them. One morning, as the sun rose pale behind clouds of dust, Tom came upon a crumbled marketplace. Half the stalls lay buried under stone, and the air smelled of smoke from old fires. He heard a faint sound there, not the call of birds, but the soft cry of a child. Tom followed the sound into the broken stalls. Behind a fallen beam, he found a small group of people. 2 women, 1 old man, and 3 children huddled together. Their clothes were torn, their faces pale from hunger. When they saw Tom, fear filled their eyes. They had seen soldiers before, and soldiers often brought trouble. Tom raised his empty hands. "I am not here to harm you," he said calmly. "I only want to help." The old man narrowed his eyes. "Why should we trust you? Many promise help, then take what little we have." Tom did not argue. Instead, he opened his pack and placed dried food and a flask of water on the ground. He stepped back. "Take these. You need them more than I do." The children's eyes widened. The women hesitated, but when Tom did not move closer, they reached for the food. The old man still watched carefully, but he did not stop them. Tom stayed with them through the day. He helped lift the heavy beam away, giving them space to breathe. He checked the walls around their hiding place, showing them which parts were weak and might fall. Before leaving, he gave them directions to a safer shelter he had passed 2 days earlier. As he walked away, one of the children called out, "Will you come back?" Tom looked over his shoulder. His face was calm, but his eyes carried kindness. "If you need me, I will." The words were simple, yet they stayed with the family long after he was gone. Days passed, and Tom moved from one part of the city to another. He repaired broken doors for families hiding in basements. He showed frightened youths how to set traps against raiders. He shared food when he had it, and when he did not, he hunted in the wild outskirts. He did not ask for thanks, nor did he tell anyone who he was. To them, he was just a lone wanderer, a man without armor who still chose to protect. But word spread quickly in quiet ways. Stories carried from one shelter to the next. People spoke of the human who traveled alone, who gave without asking, who defended the weak even after leaving the soldiers behind. One evening, Tom came across a small village of Viuri hidden among the ruins. Their stone-like skin was marked with cuts and bruises, and their homes were simple shelters built from broken walls. At first, they looked at him with suspicion. Humans were rare in their part of the city, and trust was harder to give after long wars. But that night, raiders attacked. They came with rough weapons, shouting as they stormed the village. The Viuri scrambled to defend themselves, but their strength was thin. Tom stepped forward without hesitation. He moved quickly, his blade flashing in the firelight. He did not fight with anger but with calm skill, striking only to drive the raiders away. When one of the children stumbled, Tom shielded him, standing firm against the attack. His movements carried no sign of hesitation. By the time the raiders fled, the village was safe. The Viuri stared at Tom, surprised. One of their elders approached. "You are not one of us. Why risk yourself for us?" Tom wiped his blade clean and looked at the elder with steady eyes. "Because you needed help." The elder bowed his head. "Then you are more of a protector than many who call themselves leaders." The villagers offered him food and shelter. Tom stayed for a night, repairing broken walls and teaching them how to set guards. In the morning, he moved on, leaving as quietly as he had arrived. The story of his actions spread even faster than before. Humans whispered of him around their campfires. Viuri spoke his name with growing respect. They called him the Wanderer, the man who fought without armor, the man who asked for nothing yet gave everything. Back in the Alliance camp, Myra began to hear the stories too. At first, she thought they were rumors meant to comfort frightened people. But when reports came from scouts and refugees alike, she could not deny them. Tom was out there, living by his own code, proving that he had never abandoned the spirit of the Alliance even when he left its command. Her heart grew heavier. She remembered the sharpness of her own words, the doubt she had thrown at him. She realized now that while she had spoken of selfishness, Tom had been the very opposite. He gave quietly, expecting no recognition, while she had let fear and frustration cloud her judgment. Each night she lay awake, the sound of clashing battles outside her camp mixed with the silence of her regret. The Alliance weakened, yet Tom grew stronger in the eyes of those he helped. For Tom, the days blended into one long path. He no longer thought of himself as a soldier bound to orders. He was simply human, and to him, that meant standing for those who could not stand for themselves. And though he did not seek it, his journey was shaping into something larger than he imagined. The lone wanderer was becoming a legend. The camp of the Alliance grew weaker with each passing week. Supplies thinned, soldiers fought with less energy, and whispers of doubt spread through every tent. Some humans asked if they should return to their own lands. Some Viori muttered that the humans could not be trusted. The bond that had once united them now felt fragile, as if one strong wind could tear it apart. Myra walked among her soldiers each day, her face calm though her heart was troubled. She gave orders with steady words, but she could see the unease in their eyes. She knew they felt the absence of Tom. She felt it too. The line between her pride and her guilt grew thinner with each sunrise. One evening, she sat alone in the command hall. The table before her still carried the maps of battle, but her eyes rested not on the paper but on the pile of armor in the corner. Tom's armor, still lying where he had placed it. No soldier dared touch it. To many, it was more than metal. It was a memory of strength, and without Tom inside it, it was also a reminder of loss. Myra closed her eyes and remembered the moment he had set it down. The sound of steel against the table, the quiet in his voice, the way he had walked away without anger. She had thought then that he was turning his back on them. Now she knew he had turned his back only on her words. Reports began to arrive from the ruins beyond the camp. Refugees spoke of a human who traveled alone, helping wherever he went. They said he gave food to the hungry, repaired shelters, and fought off raiders without asking for reward. At first, Myra had dismissed the stories, thinking them only tales to bring hope. But soon the reports grew too many to ignore. A scout returned one night, his armor scratched and his face weary. He bowed before Myra and said, "Commander, I saw him. He was not in armor, yet he fought like a storm. Raiders tried to burn a village, but he drove them back. The people there called him the Wanderer. They said he needed no armor, because his heart was shield enough." The words struck Myra harder than any blade. She sent the scout away and sat in silence for a long time. Shame rose within her. She had called him selfish, but he had done more for strangers than she could count. She had doubted his loyalty, but his loyalty had never been to words or titles. It had always been to life itself. Her second-in-command entered quietly. "Commander, the men speak of him more each day. They ask if he will return." Myra shook her head. "He will not return because of me. I pushed him away." The soldier hesitated. "If he does not come back, I fear the alliance may break apart." Myra looked at the maps once more, her hands tightening. "Then it is I who must make it right." That night, she walked alone along the walls of the camp. The stars were faint through smoke, but she searched them anyway. She thought of her people, of the humans, and of Tom. She thought of what he had given in silence, of the lives he had saved without recognition. And for the first time, she admitted her fault not only in her heart but aloud. "I was wrong," she whispered to the night. "And now he carries the burden I cast aside." The days that followed were heavy with battle. The enemy struck harder, sensing the weakness of the alliance. Each fight left the soldiers more worn, more broken. Myra fought at the front, her blade flashing with strength, but her spirit carried regret. She knew the soldiers looked for Tom in every battle. She saw it in their eyes when they faltered. Then came news that shook her even more. A group of Viori civilians arrived at the camp, guided by human scouts. They told stories of a man who had saved them in the ruins. He had fought against raiders alone, protecting both Viori and human alike. When they asked his name, he had only said, "I am no one. Just a man who could not walk away." The civilians looked at Myra with questioning eyes. One of them asked, "Why does such a man walk alone, while we suffer here without him?" Myra had no answer. She lowered her gaze, the weight of her regret pressing down on her chest. That night, she returned to the hall once more. She stood before Tom's armor, touching the steel plates with her hand. The metal was cold, lifeless, but in her mind, she could almost hear the sound of his calm voice. She whispered, "You never needed this armor, did you? It was never the steel that made you strong. It was you." Tears welled in her eyes, though she brushed them away quickly. Commanders were not meant to cry before their soldiers, but alone, she allowed the feeling to rise. She understood now what the Alliance had lost, and what she herself had driven away. The decision formed in her heart. She could no longer wait for him to return on his own. She had to find him, not as a commander demanding his service, but as someone asking forgiveness. She had to admit her wrongs and bring him back, not for her pride, but for the survival of them all. The next morning, Myra called her second in command. "I am leaving the camp," she said firmly. The soldier looked alarmed. "Commander, without you, we may not hold." "You will hold," Myra said. "I have taught you well. This task is mine alone. If I succeed, Tom will return. If I fail, then at least I will know I tried." The soldier bowed, though worry filled his eyes. Myra left the camp with nothing but her blade, her armor, and her resolve. She stepped into the ruins, following the faint trails of rumor and story that marked Tom's path. Each step was heavy, but her heart was clear. She was no longer walking as a commander seeking victory. She was walking as a person seeking forgiveness. Far away, Tom continued his journey, guarding the lost, feeding the hungry, standing alone against the dark. He did not know Myra had begun to seek him. He did not know that her heart, once filled with harsh words, now carried regret. Myra walked through the ruins with steady steps. Each street carried the mark of war. Broken walls stood like teeth, black smoke rose from fires that had never fully died, and silence filled the air except for the sound of her boots. Yet she did not turn back. She was searching for Tom, and nothing would stop her. She passed by a small village at the edge of the ruins. The people there looked weak, but when they saw her armor, they gathered around her. An old woman asked, "Are you looking for the wanderer?" Myra nodded. The woman pointed toward the hills. "He left this morning. He gave us food, repaired our wells, and then he moved on." Myra thanked the villagers and walked again. With each village she visited, she heard the same stories. Tom had been there before her. He left safety behind and helped strangers, carrying no banner and no armor. Some called him the shield without steel. Others said he was a light in the ruins. Each story made Myra's chest tighten with guilt but also with hope. She reached a wide river by nightfall. The bridge was broken, but she saw fresh wooden planks laid across the stones. Someone had built a path strong enough for people to cross. Myra smiled softly. It was his work. She crossed carefully, knowing she was now closer. By the next morning, Myra reached a burned settlement. Smoke still drifted from the blackened houses, but she saw people moving among the ruins. They were alive because someone had defended them. When Myra asked, the people spoke with gratitude. "The wanderer fought here," one man said. "He stood against 10 raiders. He did not wear armor, but he fought as if he had the strength of many. When the raiders fled, he told us to rebuild and have courage." Myra felt her throat tighten. She asked where he had gone next, and they pointed toward the mountains. The path grew harder as she walked. Stones cut at her boots, and the air turned colder. Her body grew tired, but her mind stayed sharp. She thought of Tom's quiet face, the calm way he had spoken even when her words had cut him. She thought of how he had left his armor behind, not because he was weak but because he had chosen a different strength. On the third day, she finally saw him. He stood on a cliff, watching the horizon. He wore simple clothes, his figure strong against the light of dawn. He carried no sword, no armor, only a small pack at his side. For a long moment, Myra did not move. She only looked at him, the man she had driven away, the man who had carried their hope even when she had crushed his spirit. At last, she stepped forward. The sound of her boots on the stone made him turn. His eyes met hers, calm but distant. "Myra," he said quietly. She stopped a few steps away. Her throat felt dry, and the words she had practiced in her mind seemed to vanish. At last, she spoke the truth. "I was wrong." Tom's expression did not change. He waited, giving her space to continue. "I spoke harshly," she said, her voice unsteady. "I doubted you. I called you selfish. But you were never selfish. You gave more than anyone. You gave until you had nothing left, and I did not see it. I only saw my own pride." Tom looked back at the horizon. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I did not walk away from the fight. I walked away from your words. The fight is still here. The people still need help. That is why I kept walking." Myra lowered her head. "The alliance is falling apart. The soldiers doubt. They look for you even when they follow me. Without you, I fear we cannot hold." Silence stretched between them. The wind moved through the mountains, carrying dust and the sound of distant birds. Myra felt her heart beat fast, waiting for his answer. Finally, Tom spoke. "I will not return for banners or titles. I will not return to wear armor that hides the truth. But I will return for the people. If they need me, I will stand with them." Relief spread through Myra, though she kept her voice steady. "That is all I ask. Not as your commander, but as someone who sees now what you have always been." For the first time since she had found him, Tom's expression softened. He gave a small nod. "Then I will walk back." Together, they began the journey down the mountains. Myra walked beside him, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She knew their path would not be easy. The enemy still pressed against the alliance, and the soldiers would face many battles. But she also knew that with Tom beside them, their hope would return. On their way back, they passed through villages again. People recognized Tom and ran to him, thanking him for what he had done. Myra saw the way their faces lit up, the way their voices carried warmth. She realized that Tom was more than a soldier. He was a symbol. He was proof that even in ruins, kindness and strength could still stand. At night, as they camped under the stars, Myra finally asked him, "Why do you help strangers when you could rest? You owe them nothing." Tom looked at the fire. His answer was simple. "Because I can. And if I can, then I must." The words stayed in Myra's heart long after he spoke them. By the time they neared the Alliance camp, word had already spread. Scouts had seen them returning. Soldiers gathered at the gates, their faces filled with surprise and joy. When Tom stepped into the camp, the air changed. The men and women stood straighter. Their voices grew stronger. Hope returned to their eyes. Myra watched quietly as they welcomed him. She did not step forward to claim his return as her victory. She let the moment belong to him, for it was his strength, not her command, that lifted their hearts. That night, as the fires burned bright in the camp, Myra sat near Tom. The soldiers told stories of his deeds, laughing and cheering. For the first time in a long while, the camp felt alive. Myra looked at Tom and said softly, "You walked away once. You had every right. But you came back. For that, I am grateful." Tom met her eyes and gave a small smile. "The fight is not over. And neither are we." The stars shone above them, clear and bright. The path ahead was filled with danger, but now they would walk it together. The Alliance camp was alive with energy as Tom returned. Soldiers moved with purpose, fury, and humans standing side by side once more. The air was filled with hope, a feeling that had been missing since Tom had walked away. He had returned not for pride, not for armor, but for the people who needed him. Myra stood nearby, watching quietly. She had learned her lesson. Leadership was not only about giving orders, but about understanding courage and respect. Tom had reminded her that true strength could be quiet and patient, not loud or demanding. She felt pride for her soldiers, yet she knew the real power came from the man who had walked among the ruins and returned of his own choice. The enemy had sensed the weakness of the Alliance before, but now they faced a force renewed. With Tom leading alongside the commanders, humans and Fury fought together, their movements precise and coordinated. The enemy struck fiercely, expecting fear and hesitation, but they found none. Every soldier felt the courage of the Wanderer, the human who had returned without armor but with unmatched spirit. Tom did not wear the heavy plates of war this time. Instead, he moved lightly, agile and aware. His simple clothes did not hide his presence. Every step he took carried assurance. Soldiers followed his lead, inspired not by a uniform but by his actions. Myra joined him at the front. "Are you ready?" she asked. Tom looked at the soldiers lined up behind them, at the humans and Fury waiting for guidance, and nodded. "I have always been ready. Now, they just need me to walk with them." The battle began with the first rays of sunlight. Enemy forces surged from the hills, their machines firing with deadly precision. Yet the Alliance stood firm. Tom moved among the soldiers, protecting the weak, guiding the strong, and facing every danger head-on. His blade struck with skill, not anger, and his calm presence carried reassurance to every fighter. The humans and Fury fought with renewed strength. They moved as one, inspired by a man who had once walked away but returned out of care for life, not for power. The enemy faltered against the unity of those who fought together, their confidence shaken by courage that did not come from weapons alone. Hours passed, the battle intense, yet every soldier remembered why they fought. Tom led them through the worst dangers, shielding those who could not defend themselves and encouraging those who hesitated. Myra stayed close, learning from his patience, seeing the way he cared for each person without favoritism. At last, the enemy began to retreat, unable to face the combined strength of humans and Fury guided by the calm courage of the Wanderer. Soldiers cheered as the last enemy forces disappeared into the horizon. The Alliance had won, not through machines or strategy alone, but through the quiet power of humanity. When the battle ended, Tom walked among the soldiers, helping the wounded, offering words of comfort. He did not seek recognition, yet every eye followed him with gratitude. The soldiers called him hero, not because of his armor, but because he had returned and stood for them when hope had been fragile. Myra approached him. "You showed them what it means to be human," she said softly. "Not through orders, but through courage and kindness. Tom looked at her calmly. I only did what I could. You questioned me before, but now you see it is not titles or ranks that matter. It is actions and care that hold people together. Myra nodded. She realized the full truth. Strength came not from pride or steel, but from the heart. A person could inspire without a uniform, lead without a sword, and protect without expectation. Tom had proved that, not with words, but with deeds. The Alliance camp celebrated that evening. Soldiers shared stories of the battles, the rescues, and the bravery they had witnessed. Yet amid the cheers, Tom remained humble. He ate quietly, helped wherever he could, and listened to those who spoke of hope returning to their hearts. The Viore elders approached Myro later. The human has shown us what we forgot, one of them said. Courage does not need to be loud. Strength is not in armor alone. It is in the choice to stand for life when others cannot. Myra smiled. She knew it was true. Tom's journey had reshaped more than the battlefield, it had reshaped hearts. The following days were filled with rebuilding. Villages were restored, walls repaired, and families reunited. Tom moved among them, guiding and teaching. He never took the lead unless needed. Instead, he empowered others, showing that leadership could be gentle, patient, and effective. Children followed him in the streets, asking questions, watching how he moved, learning what it meant to care. Soldiers trained under his quiet observation, learning that courage was not measured by medals or armor but by action and heart. Myra observed all of this, realizing that Tom had left a legacy that would last far longer than the battles themselves. One evening, as the sun set, Tom stood on a hill overlooking the camp. Myra joined him, and together they watched the smoke from cooking fires rise into the sky. The fight is never truly over, Myra said. No, Tom replied. But every act of courage makes the world stronger. Every life protected becomes part of that strength. That is what humans bring to the universe. Not just weapons, not just strategy, but care and courage, even when no one watches. Myro looked at him and smiled. You have reminded me why we fight, and why we must fight together. Thank you for showing me the way. Tom nodded. It is not only me. Every person who chooses to stand for others carries the same strength. I only walk with them. You do the same with your soldiers. The stars began to shine above them. For the first time in months, Myra felt peace. The alliance was still fragile, but hope had returned. The soldiers would rebuild, the villages would flourish, and the bonds between humans and Viore would grow stronger. Tom walked down the hill, returning to the camp. Myra followed, ready to face the future with the lessons he had taught her. The journey of war was not yet finished, but the human legacy had been proven. Courage, kindness, and quiet strength could reshape the world. And in that moment, the Alliance understood that true heroes were not always those who wore the heaviest armor or shouted the loudest. True heroes were those who acted with heart, who stood for others when no one asked, and who never abandoned life, even when doubt had threatened to destroy hope.